In the previous video, I showed you how the little pieces of data were sent between the client and the server on the login um, when you logged in. But what is the actual code that allows that to happen, at least on the client side? That's what I wanted to show you next. If you just open up the source code for this page, we can just do that, view page source, and then if we look at the client.js file, if we look down here at the login function, this is what is being called when you click the login button. What first happens here is that the value that was typed in the username field is gathered here, and actually we first instantiate a user object, just an empty one, and then we add a username property to that user object, and then we populate it with the value that was in the username field, and then we create also a user.password attribute on the user object and populate it with what the user typed in the password field. So that creates a user object, and then I'm not going to explain all the intricacies of this fetch method, but it's a built-in method, relatively new one that exists in the JavaScript language to send requests from a client to a server, and it can send objects that you've created client side and send them to a server, and then the fetch can wait for a response from the server and process that response. So we've created the object here, and then this is how we're sending the object to the server in these statements here. For example, in this one in particular, we're telling JavaScript to turn the user object into a string, a JSON string, and you can learn more about JSON if you look at the written documentation that accompanies this assignment. And that sort of stringified object is sent to the server, and then the fetch waits for a response from the server, and when it comes back, it looks at that response, and that response, remember, which had a username and a password attribute, we can then use to populate these fields which are right next to the username input field and the password input field. Right, as you recall, incorrect was placed right next to the input field of the login name, and then sometimes incorrect was placed here. So that's how this this function login sends data to the server, waits for a response from the server, and then in the method here, we take the data from the response in the server, and populate the GUI, the login GUI.